Chapter 96. Cecil's venom tongue. Damien is a professional MMA fighter, one of the top 5 rising stars in this region, but looking at him push Mr. Gregory back. He might have risen to number 1 after returning from the moon, a student said to another as the blows and kicks exchanged by the teacher and student rang loud. Just look at Tyler and Vin. They're not even that interested in the fight, they've grown ridiculously, a girl said, drawing Godfrey's eyes to Tyler and Vin, who sat in the combat hall along with a few other third-year students. In looks, Isolde wasn't beyond Tyler. Tyler had a much bigger fan base in Manhattan due to her physical appeal alone, and she surpassed Isolde in the criteria of charm and figure. But it had to be noted that Isolde was 16, and Tyler was 18 with a developed figure, though both of them were of the same height. However, should a 16-year-old Tyler be compared to Isolde, she would lose without a doubt. Vin, on the other hand, wore a hoodie, and his bright blonde bangs hid his eyes. He was as famous as Damien, but while Damien was truly famous, Vin was just as infamous. Together with Tyler, they formed a powerful trio, where both boys had been fighting over Tyler right from their freshman year. Man, he's strong. Mr. Gregory was among the top summoners in Manhattan in his prime, and a master at hand-to-hand combat because of his summon's innate strength, but he's just been defending against Damien, and those blows seem to hurt, Isaac gasped. A scowl rang from behind, prompting him and the other members of the Shadow Club to turn. Their eyes landed on Cecil, who didn't even seem interested in watching the fight, making Godfrey wonder what brought her here. Damien is one of the few in this world with the rare mutation that made him gain about 90% out of symbiosis, and it also granted him the crimson bones of his summon, all of which led to him being hospitalized for 2 years. You can only gasp, but you can't match him. He's true greatness. He might be 20 years in high school, but he's one of a kind in the entire world. Cecil crossed her arms. Wow, Damien is 20 years old, but he looks so young. 90% out of symbiosis. That can't even be called symbiosis anymore, more like he narrowly escaped full bestiality, Godfrey thought. Even without symbiosis, with those crimson bones, Damien was far stronger than a normal human. It was no wonder he was rising quickly through the ranks as an MMA fighter. Damien couldn't even be considered fully human. Godfrey snapped out of his thoughts as Cecil refused to end there. There's only one description about Vin's summon I want you to know. Its flames are recorded to be 10 times hotter than lightning. Tyler is a nightmare with her Black Widow spider, but all the Shadow Club has is a girl who is constantly assaulted by her family members. Cecil rolled her eyes at Lucy, who flinched as all eyes locked on her. A freshman who joined street fighting because he wants to get stronger, and his mother's health is slowly crippling them financially. An insecure junior who tries to cover a scar and hide his strength due to his cowardly upbringing, and a powerful girl who isn't any different from a cripple, as there are so many chains holding her down. Cecil scoffed. Restrictions you could break through, but you don't want to because you're daddy's girl. All these are led by a boy who grew up thinking he's justice incarnate because his father was hailed a hero. Cecil stared right into Godfrey's eyes. He's no hero, and you're just like the rest of us, Godfrey, maybe even worse. At least none of us has killed a student in a fit of rage. You're better off without awakening. You'll run this school to the ground with your selfish ideals, just like your father. He simply protected you and your mother and left the others to be torn apart by those savage orcs, but I didn't see that in the broadcast. Whispers flew around as all attention turned to the Shadow Club members. Cecil didn't bother lowering her voice. In fact, it seemed she made it loud deliberately. To think I apologized to you. Godfrey barely finished speaking when Isolde walked up to Cecil and slapped her across the face. Cecil held her cheek yet chuckled. Bye-bye, princess, you're going back to your dungeon. She couldn't finish as Isolde slapped the rest of whatever she had to say out of her mouth. The slap this time was heavier. It made Cecil fall on her bottom. Even then, Cecil scoffed. I don't think anyone from a better home would speak in such a manner. You're in no better condition, maybe even much worse, Isolde spat coldly. She turned away, only for Cecil to yell, I'm sure you'll dump Godfrey as you did John once you found another. What did you just say? Isolde froze, her eyes wide. Godfrey saw rage like never before on Isolde's face. Only Isaac, Lucy, and Percival had seen this side of her. She was about to erupt. Godfrey grabbed her shoulder and pulled her into his chest, holding her close with both hands while glaring at Cecil. Get lost. He didn't know what had gotten into Cecil, but she had grown even more venomous than what he once knew, and seemed to have it out for them. Within the combat hall, Tyler chuckled softly. Godfrey's protectiveness makes me blush. He knows how to get a woman, and with such an innocent expression too. Vin looked in that direction. I've heard that he's a great boxer. It's exaggerated, Vin. He might be good, but you're the top student of the best master of the ancient boxing style in this region. There's no need to pay attention to all that hype, a fellow senior said. I believe he beat Cecil because she isn't a full professional, and her ancient arts talent isn't that refined, another said. Cecil is a sick person, Isaac said as they all returned to their club. Why are you still holding my hand? Isolde glared at Godfrey while looking at their entwined fingers. Godfrey let go with an awkward smile. Humph, Isolde harumphed, went to the window, brought out her earbuds, and put them into her ears while looking away through the window. Street fighting isn't safe. It could get you into worse problems than what you're trying to use it to solve, Godfrey glared at Isaac. But my mother. We'll take her to my mom. Lately, her summons healing water is able to handle illnesses, not just cuts or regenerating lost limbs, Godfrey interjected, and Isaac nodded. Now that's settled, why didn't anyone inform me about Lucy? She has denied us from helping, and truthfully, there's nothing we can do to stop the treatment she's receiving from her family. What's worse, her father has called her home. She'll be going in 3 days with her brother, Percival said. And the tournament is just 2 weeks away, Isaac added. Seeing the direction the conversation was taking, Lucy quickly spoke. You need to prepare for this tournament, Godfrey. Nexus Club knows the reason for your strength is because you're a tri-summoner, but since this tournament is majorly about summons, they're preparing for vengeance. Percival nodded. They're training in their summoner skills and perfecting their innate and adaptive skills. Gregory has set up a training plan for them, and all of them have been in dungeons. What about you? Are you not in the same class? Isaac asked. My teacher isn't happy that I stood by while John was beaten. Not that we've been on a good note before, Percival stated coolly. When all of them looked at Godfrey like he was being left behind by people who lost to him a month ago, Godfrey simply tilted his head, and behind him, 3 mana constructs appeared, each made of translucent golden aura. It was Tempest, Ballista and Mountain, with their arms crossed. Their huge bodies made the room suddenly look smaller. You've learned projection, Lucy couldn't believe her eyes. Awesome, Isaac's eyes glowed, only for him to shrink his neck as Godfrey and Percival glared at him. They knew it was his lust for strength that led to his street fighting. Dispersing the projection, Godfrey faced Lucy. I did not just sleep throughout my suspension. Now we're going to see if your summon can evolve. It can, Isolde's reply came suddenly, and everyone turned toward her. Can it? Lucy asked in disbelief. Isolde gave a soft nod. The iron-clawed crab can evolve into a high tier with potential close to, or even reaching, a lord tier, but there's only been 2 people who have done it in history. Only 2 people. It doesn't sound feasible for us to achieve such a feat in just 3 days. Lucy had gone too deep telling herself that she had reached her peak, that everything Isolde said sounded too high to be within her reach, like some abstract dream. There's a green gate dungeon that will suit our requirements. According to the fluctuations, it's an 8 dungeon, Isolde said. Her eyes locked on Godfrey. This would be her first time going into a dungeon together with him, and it made her excited. Just then Edwin walked into the club with Cecil. Isolde, a word. Isolde followed him out, and they went straight to the headmaster's office. Upon seeing Isolde, Sebastian sighed heavily. Isolde, I'm afraid you might have to visit your family. She insulted me, laying our vulnerabilities in public. I was right in every accord to make her know she was wrong, Isolde retorted firmly. But your parents said I shouldn't engage in a fight. They didn't say I shouldn't defend myself. Last time I wasn't the one attacked, but this time I was, Isolde interjected solemnly. Sebastian dropped the telephone. You may leave. Cecil's eyes widened. But isn't she? Isolde elegantly rose to her feet, flipped her hair, and left the office. As the sun began to set, 5 teenagers alighted from a taxi, all wearing casual attire. Isolde tied her hair into a ponytail and wore a face cap. She stared at the abandoned farmlands, her eyes gleaming as she could barely feel the fluctuations beyond the short wooden fence. There's a house there, Isaac pointed at a house in the distance, inside the farmland. Not far from it was a barn. Prepare yourselves, Godfrey said as he walked into the farm with the others. In the next instant, they found themselves in the middle of a brook. It reached their waists. Around them was a foggy forest. Is this a joke? Of all places, we had to appear right in the middle of a water body, Isaac grumbled aloud. Godfrey pressed his fingers against his lips. something's coming. Everyone kept silent, and they began to hear twigs being crushed under the feet of something. A bear, a little bigger than a normal bear. It had much longer claws and reddish-brown man patterns around the head, neck, and chest, making it look like a reddish-brown mane. Its forelegs were longer than its hind legs and possessed absurdly long claws. About 4 short, stubby horns grew out of the head of this bear. They all recognized it as one of the beasts Edwin taught about, the dire bear. It rose to its hind legs, roaring the moment it saw them. A diagram appeared, and a white wyvern slammed the head of the dire bear into the soil before freezing it. Godfrey came out of the water with Isolde and Percival, and to their surprise, Percival made the water in their clothes come out like bubbles until their clothes were literally dried. Just then the trees began to shake, roars echoed. Dire bears are dreaded because of their numbers. They can have packs twice as many as wolves. I think that's what we're about to face, Lucy said. 2 golden portals appeared beside Godfrey. Mountain and Ballista came out. Isaac brought out his mammoth spider, all of which stood beside the white wyvern. A blue portal appeared beside Percival, and an 8-foot-tall humanoid whose wavy blue hair fell backward like the waves of the sea emerged. Fine scales covered every part of the humanoid's body. The scales at its chest were golden. The Sea King held a golden trident as water floated around it in an imperfect circle. It wore blue shell pauldrons, vambraces, and shin guards with blue fins like sails. The Sea King's face had no scale. Its appearance caught the eyes of everyone, but no one could talk as 24 dire bears emerged from the fog, lunging at them with unrestrained bloodlust. Grace, the white wyvern, lifted her head and breathed out white mist that quickly crystallized into frost. It engulfed 3 dire bears, freezing them inside resplendent ice. Grace took several bold steps, swinging her tail with such force that it slammed a dire bear to the ground, killing it instantly. A dire bear roared at the wyvern, and it glared at the beast, roaring back with greater might before freezing it. Isaac's mammoth spider moved its 8 legs, blurring to the left before launching webs at 2 dire bears. The webs weren't strong enough to stop the bears from moving, just enough to provoke them and gain their attention. With ravenous eyes, the 2 bears dashed toward the spider, who quickly climbed a tree and spat a dense amount of webs, covering one dire bear in a web sack before it shot a web string at the other end and drew it upward. Losing its connection to the ground, the dire bear wasn't as frightening anymore. The mammoth pierced it with its sharp, yellow and black forelimbs. While these summons clashed intensely with the dire bears, the Sea King simply held a dire bear in place with one hand. He looked at the bear for a while before crushing its skull by applying slight pressure to his fingers. Another lunged at him, over 1,200 pounds, with its mouth wide open and claws ready to sink into its target. The Sea King's eye locked on the bear, and with a nonchalant back slap, the dire bear flew backward at greater speed, vanishing into the fog, though they could still hear the sounds of it hitting and breaking down trees. The Sea King didn't even consider this a battle worth its attention, and so it turned its eyes to the golden-armored knights, efficiently cutting down the dire bears. Mountain pulled out his spear from the corpse of the last dire bear and looked around. The battlefield was filled with ice and webs, but they had successfully killed 30 dire bears without casualty. Isolde, can you fly up and check how big this forest is? We might not need to leave the forest, Godfrey said, turning to Isolde, who responded with a nod. But just then, the fog came at them as if blown by the wind. The moment it engulfed them, Godfrey bellowed, "Come together." He watched as the others tried to get to him, but as they came closer, they grew faint until they vanished from his sight. Even Mountain and Ballista were gone, lost in the fog, which still moved with speed. With a thought, he retrieved Mountain and Ballista into his soul space. "What's this?" Godfrey frowned. After a while, the fog stopped moving and began to clear up. When it completely cleared up, Godfrey found himself outside Skyline 88. A crowd of people gathered outside as he saw his mother and Victoria being covered, declared dead, and pushed toward an ambulance. The sight made Godfrey's eyes grow wide. He tried to move but discovered he couldn't. Chains of great size held his limbs in place. That sight, this thing before his eyes, was his greatest fear, losing his mother to this world, knowing that the larger masses scorned humanoid summoners. He might have been oblivious before, but after the joint dungeon, that ignorance was wiped off. The first thing a man did when he saw his summon was point a gun at him. Though Godfrey hid it deep, he knew strength was the only way to keep their mouths shut and protect his mother. After hearing readjustment class a couple of times, he did his research and knew. Humanoid summoners might also be summoners, but they weren't accepted because of the series of nationwide massacres a good number of them had committed, beginning with Cain. "You still couldn't save her," a voice rang in his head. "It's a lie," Godfrey muttered. "Your eyes can see it. You know your fear will come to pass. The world is different from a few students. You can never be like your dad." "I'll never want to die like him," Godfrey roared as he clawed after the ambulance that drove his mother away. This was an illusion. He desperately wanted to cling on to that, but all memory of what happened before he got here was covered in a mental fog. It was like the experience of a dream, where one didn't remember the real world. While Godfrey went through this, Isolde found herself tied in a cave. She struggled, but all her strength couldn't break these ropes. She could mold thick chains, yet before the bind of these ropes, she was suddenly powerless. A silhouette appeared at the mouth of the cave. As the figure drew near, her golden-orange eyes trembled as she recognized this individual. It was the first person she ever saw in a dream, her nightmare. He had golden hair, wore a grey hood with a large red X mark, and both hands were in his pockets. Godfrey, but older with a finer muscular build, handsome yet with an absolutely ice-cold face. His black sclera and golden irises locked on her. It was then Isolde discovered she was bigger, as if fast-forwarded into her future self. This Godfrey wiped his mouth. "Grace tastes nice when roasted," he grinned wickedly. Isolde's heart shuddered, tears appearing at the corner of her eyes. She broke at the sight of Godfrey, tears rolling down her porcelain skin uncontrollably. Meanwhile, Percival found himself watching a scene, as he laughed and played around a fountain, with a beauty now known as the ex-queen, Tyler. Back then, he was a freshman and Tyler had just transferred into sophomore year. Both of them were close. But the scene quickly changed to Vin, standing above his younger self with flaming fists. Percival's hand instinctively went to his nose mask, touching where his scar was. Fog blew, clearing up the scene, and from it Vin came out, his eyes lit ablaze. Still offended, water body, Vin grinned. Blue scales covered Percival's body as the Sea King appeared. Not just that, a huge, blue-scaled beast, almost 500 feet long, floated above him. The blue-horned Leviathan, the true ruler of the oceans, a beast whose scales were known to be tougher than a dragon's, and its size even greater than an eastern dragon at its prime age. "I am no longer that boy." Percival's eyes narrowed, veins pumping within them. While a huge battle ensued, Lucy found herself trying to get out of her room but couldn't. She could hear Sam's wicked laughter beyond the door, causing her great despair. To all of them, this experience was no different from a dream, so real, no one could ascertain it until they woke up. However, one person wasn't affected. It was Isaac. He knelt beside his mammoth spider, with lots of Weeabea corpses littered around him. Some were caught in webs and stabbed to death, but his mammoth spider was riddled with injuries while he was getting exhausted. "Where are you guys?" Isaac looked around. He was still in the forest. Forcing himself to his feet, he continued moving but froze as he arrived at a lake with lots of trees. In the heart of this lake stood a towering bear with lots of weapons stabbed into it, including thorns. This bear, the size of an armored truck, was definitely the final boss. It roared and the forest shook. Isaac took one step backward, but two thick vines the size of a man's forearm, entwined with several others all equipped with thorns, burst out of the water. The mammoth spider picked up Isaac and retreated, but thorns burst from beneath it, binding the spider's legs. As the vines wormed their way up the summon, piercing through its hard carapace, Isaac retrieved it into his soul space. He landed in the midst of the vines, horror smeared on his face as the boss strolled out of the lake, looking even bigger than he thought. Godfrey, Isolde, Percival, Lucy, watching the ambulance moving out of the place, Godfrey furiously tried to get to it but couldn't. In his fury, a portal flared up before him. The moment Tempest appeared, he opened his palm and what looked like a mini-sun with a halo manifested. It expanded in a bright radiance, sweeping outwardly in every direction. As the golden radiance swept past Godfrey, his weeping stopped as he found himself curled into a ball in the foggy forest. Alarmed, Godfrey rose to his feet. "It was an illusion, I didn't even know," he thought, looking at Tempest, who was also scanning his surroundings. "I see her." Tempest pointed his greatsword in a particular direction. All Godfrey could see was thick fog, but he somehow knew Tempest referred to Isolde. Dashing in that direction, he soon found Isolde. She was in a position as if she was tied and kept crying despite him shaking her. Tempest, Godfrey looked at his chief knight, who lifted up his left gauntleted hand and manifested the intense light ball. This time it blew outward, spreading far and clearing up the fog, revealing Percival and Lucy, all of whom woke up along with Isolde. I'm here. Out of words, these were all Godfrey could say to Isolde as her eyes adjusted to him. Their eyes locked. Godfrey saw the intense emotions in her eyes and felt the need to clarify. I think we were all in an illusion that displayed our greatest fears. I saw my mother's death. I bet you all saw something similar. I see, Isolde said quietly. Where's Isaac? Percival's question made all of them look around. Still trying to evade the dungeon boss, Isaac, thronged with thick vines, shot a web string, taking himself further away from the huge bear. A portal flashed, and the mammoth spider appeared, instantly manifesting a web net several meters wide and 7 meters above the ground. It provided enough space for Isaac and his spider to maneuver, since the floor lacked space. He would have escaped had it not been for the army of werebears around the lake. Once Isaac tried escaping, he would face over 20 werebears, each having a tier of 5.3. Top-level elites. Even if he could handle 2 or 3 at once, 20 was a big number, especially for creatures with claws, and his spider wasn't immune to claw attacks. His hope was slowly dying, but he held on. However, it finally shattered as the vines wormed their way up to the web net and shot toward him from all sides. Suddenly, a shadow loomed above, prompting both Isaac, the dungeon boss, and its minions to look up. A white-scaled wyvern flew above them. Grace opened her mouth and a forceful mist, like a torrent of snow, burst out, engulfing the lake, the dungeon boss, the minions, and even the web net. Everything froze, all except Isaac and his spider. Isaac gasped as he stared at the iced foes all around him, even the dungeon boss in its standing pose. Blood stained the ice as they had spikes inside, piercing right through each and every frozen creature. All of them died, yet the scene looked like a work of art. A huge gale blew against Isaac's face as the wyvern landed on the ice, revealing Isolde, Godfrey, Percival, and Lucy, who were on the summon's back. Isaac, Lucy rushed toward him with concern. Godfrey came right after the freshman, who collapsed on the ground after retrieving his summon. I have to say, you did good surviving this long. Isaac raised an eyebrow at Isolde being so close to Godfrey. He envied the sophomore's ability to charm such a rich beauty, but wasn't it too much? He was the one they were supposed to be showering attention on right now. Tusk, Isaac clicked his tongue as he looked away. What kept you guys for so long? We were in an illusion, Lucy replied. What? I've found it, everyone heard Percival's voice, and turned to see the blue-haired junior taking a dungeon core from a pillar of water that came out of the ice. He turned my ice into water. Isolde was amazed. She knew how cold the ice of a white wyvern in its process of evolving into a frost dragon was. After making sure Isaac was fine, everyone gathered to see Lucy put the dungeon core on her iron-clawed crab. We've already fed it 2 dungeon cores so far. It has long reached its peak. This core should stimulate it even if it doesn't evolve, Isolde said to Godfrey in a soft tone. Just then, an intense heat radiated off the crab as it began to expand, growing from 5 feet to a great 8 feet at its shell top, and 12 meters from front claw to tail. Built like a tank, this crab had crimson and ember-orange chitinous armor, with jagged ridges running along its shell like glowing cracks of molten light, pulsing like veins. Its claws were huge and saw-edged, shaped almost like short greatswords made of volcanic metal. The intense heat radiating off it made Isaac yell, "Does it want to cook us alive?" That's it, the evolved version you showed us, Isolde. The Crimson Dreadclaw, tier 6 with a potential of 8. A Lord tier potential, Lucy gasped, covering her mouth in shock as her hair began to change its color. The roots became crimson while the rest, down to her long twin ponytails, became ember orange. You look good, Percival's calm statement made Lucy blush. Of course, her looks were what made a rich heir like Lucian from Polaris ask her for a dance, but her identity as a low-tier summoner made her like gold buried in a pile of excreta. Pursing her lips, she eyed Godfrey, but the golden-haired teenager was busy examining her summon. In the next moment, Mountain was summoned. It was then Godfrey looked at her. Now that our summons are both at the same tier, how about another spar? I haven't really tested Mountain's new strength. Lucy paled, her face turning white. The Crimson Dreadclaw scuttled to her back, not minding its absurd size in comparison to its summoners. 3 days later, Lucy opened a door and walked into her family house. Her eyes landed on her father, mother, and brother, all seated at the dining table over a meal. They noticed the head cover she used to hide her hair. "What's with the weird cap?" Sam spat. "It took you a whole more day to get here. Couldn't you see that your brother came on time? Where did you go when I clearly stated you should return with your brother?" Cedric, Lucy's father, said coldly. "I went out with my friends." Lucy's reply made Cedric rise to his feet, veins throbbing along his arm as he shot a dangerous glare at her. Before he could take a step, Lucy's mother blocked him. "She's your daughter," the mother said softly. Cedric frowned. "Listen and listen well," he stared at Lucy. "You will apologize to all of your brother's friends. I did not train you to be disrespectful. You will do that or get pulled out of that school." Lucy clenched her teeth. "They tortured me, burnt my fingers. Sam also hit me several times and locked me up and made me miss my test all because of them. I thought I had a brother. I never knew I was only his sister when his friends were comfortable with me." "Shut up and do what I say," Cedric hissed, his glare intensifying. "I won't," Lucy replied before he even finished. "What?" Sam, Cedric, and even her mother were all shocked at her reply. Sam snickered inwardly. "You're so dead." Cedric looked at his wife, seeing her shake her head at him with a pleading gaze, yet he tossed her aside, charging toward Lucy. But just then they heard screams coming from outside. That kind of sound always meant one thing and one thing alone: a dungeon break. They had been seeing it happen in different places in the news, but the thought of a dungeon break occurring at the high-tier Blue Gate dungeon, frequently cleared, never dawned on them. A boar summon, about 3.5 feet tall, was thrown through the door. The summon lay lifeless on the floor as blood came out of the deep claw wounds on its body. Lucy looked at the 4-foot-tall lioness, which had a golden crescent moon totem on both arms. It had golden claws and fangs. This was a 3.1 minion of the Black Mane Pride dungeon, a dungeon with 3 bosses, 2 mini-bosses and 1 main boss. All 3 bosses were lions with a pride of their own. The mini-bosses had 4 lionesses each, and the main boss had 8. Each of these lionesses was a top-level low-tier, a creature that could tear apart most civilians, as it was stronger than most summoners' low-tier summons. But as it leapt at them, Sam's eyes narrowed greatly. "She's already frozen in fear. Get out of the way," Sam thought as he rose to his feet. It was time to let his mother see the difference between both her children, who would be important in society and who would always be frozen in fear in situations like this. Once his mother beheld his armadillo's glory in a time like this, she'd understand why Lucy was in the wrong all along. All these thoughts blew up in Sam's mind, but it all came crashing down as Lucy stomped the ground, unleashing a shockwave that blasted a top-level low-tier dungeon beast out of the house. Sam couldn't believe his eyes. His parents were even more shocked. Her summon had a potential of 3.3 at its peak, meaning on her own she was quite weak. Not even her skills could affect the lioness, but Lucy knocked it backward without even looking serious. Before their eyes, Lucy removed the head cover, revealing her eye-catching new hair color, much different from the once dull color. "No, it can't be." Sam's heart pounded intensely when he saw her hair. In that moment, a portal flared up. From it stepped out an 8-foot-tall crimson and ember-orange crab with pincers shaped like short greatswords, only slightly curved. With such a massively armored size, it even dwarfed a tank. The ferocious lioness suddenly became tiny before this formidable crimson dreadclaw crab. The air rippled as heat burst out of the cracks on its chitinous exoskeleton. While the lioness died on the spot, the family felt like they were in a giant pot, their skins quickly becoming red as they retreated to protect themselves. As the crimson dreadclaw moved, and Lucy along with it, the family rushed to the door and saw the crab charging at 3 other lionesses and a black mane lion, a 5.5 high-tier mini-boss. Standing at 5 feet with a lustrous black mane, it roared with the inborn pride of a king, but the crab unleashed its heat wave, killing the 3 lionesses before swinging its massive claws. Despite its size, this crab swung its pincers with the uncanny precision of a swordsman, utilizing the sharpness of its pincers to the utmost. By the time it was done, the mini-boss fell lifelessly to the ground, with deep cuts that even revealed its bones. Sam couldn't believe his eyes. His summon had peaked at 4.1, and his father saw him as his pride, but Lucy's summon cut down a 5.5 mini-boss without receiving a single hit. A mini-boss that would completely tear his inferno-scaled armadillo into 2. While Sam was lost in his comparison, the other mini-boss arrived with its 4 lionesses and 8 others, a sign that the main boss was close. The crimson dreadclaw crab's pincers glowed and burst into flames, as it swung its natural swords at the lionesses, leaving molten scars on the asphalt road and through walls of buildings. It was quickly swarmed, attacked from all sides despite its scalding heat, and the mini-boss pounced on it, clawing and biting but just couldn't get through the crab's thick armor. It was different from fighting a tank with swords and daggers. "Kill them all, you have it in you," Lucy said inwardly, and as if empowered by its summoner's words, steam burst through the cracks along its armor, and it unleashed a massive shockwave that launched the lionesses away. The asphalt road shattered with a molten underlay, like there was an underground volcanic eruption. Only a few of the lionesses rose up, and they were suffering from bad burns. Some couldn't even walk properly. The Crimson Dreadclaw scuttled, cleaving through all of them before facing the mini-boss. It growled at the crab, trying to chase it away, but the crab swung both claws, unleashing a crescent wave of flames that opened a gruesome charred wound on the mini-boss body. It collapsed immediately, smoke leaving its mouth. Lucy, her mother's eyes moistened. Her happiness quickly changed to fright when the 7-feet-tall main boss arrived, a 6.6 black mane lion. It was beyond what the 6 Crimson Dreadclaw crab could fight. It didn't even show signs of being affected by the crab's heat. Instead, it approached with majesty. "Man, are all the taxi drivers so afraid? We clearly said we'll protect him." A loud voice made Sam and his parents turn to the other side. Sam's mouth almost fell to the ground when he saw Isaac, the one who spoke, Percival with his nose mask, Isolde with a face cap, and finally Godfrey in a black hood. "Do you honestly expect a man to drive into a place people are fleeing from?" Percival replied coolly. Godfrey walked ahead of the group, a golden spear manifested in his grasp. Holding the shaft with the bottom locked in his armpit, he pointed the spear at the lion, and it suddenly expanded over 20 meters, piercing through the lion's chest. Lightning crackled through the spear, blowing up a hole in the main boss chest, and the spear dispersed while the boss collapsed. Cedric's pupils shook. Did he just witness a student kill a 6.6 high-tier beast without his summon? To do such a thing, that summoner must either be a dual summoner with 2 top-level high-tier summons, but that spear alone meant this young man had a humanoid summon. "You're Mr. Cedric Woods, right?" Isolde asked as she walked up to him. Upon realizing who this young teenager was, Cedric's heart shuddered. Was this the friend Lucy was talking about? Was this an opportunity? Were her friends here to apologize to him, and would Isolde use her connection to grant him a lofty position at one of her family's businesses? Expectations bloomed in Cedric's eyes. "Lucy has revealed that you've subjected her to maltreatment and abuse. Even in our current world, hitting your child like she's an animal is a crime." Isolde's stern words were like a hammer to Cedric's heart. What?" he stuttered. "You didn't stop there. You've also been beating up your wife, and even cheating on her with her co-worker." Cedric's eyes widened while Lucy's mother stared at the man in despair. She had been enduring all this, and he still went outside. Isolde turned to Lucy's mother. "There's a permanent residence for you and your daughter at Pendragon Island. You'll also get a new job." Wait, this is all a mistake," Cedric said while shaking, but Lucy's mother walked out of the house, still in shock at what she had just heard. She didn't doubt it. She had suspicions already, and someone like Isolde, from the most prominent family in this region, wouldn't come to her doorstep to blabber lies. They had even helped her daughter. "You can't hit me anymore." Lucy spat at Cedric as she held her mother. Cedric rushed after them but was blocked by a wall of young men, Godfrey, Percival, and Isaac. Isaac waved at Sam. "See you at school." As they walked away, Percival glared at him. "What?" Isaac asked innocently. "Are we not going to see Sam at school? We attend the same school." Terrified, Sam faced his father. "Dad, I'm not going back to that school, I'm not." Smirk. The next day, early in the morning when it was still foggy, the closer Godfrey got to the bench, the more beautiful the girl seated there became. It was like removing layers and layers of fog, until he finally stood face to face with Isolde. She sat while he stood, but their eyes met, his ocean blue eyes and her golden orange ones. "Hi, pretty face, right on time. You're really serious about taking the valedictorian spot from me, huh?" "A bet's a bet, and I plan on winning." "It's an unfair battle, a ferocious boxing tri-summoner against a weak dual summoner," Isolde pouted. "You weak," Godfrey scoffed. "I've done my research on your giant null dragonfly. It has a queen-tier potential and has a tendency to always get there. It can negate the abilities of its opponents, making it a perfect counter to almost every summon on the planet. It can also see the future, but it's more frequent during combat, which is why summoners of Giant Null Dragonfly end up either as an invisible or a Queen-tier summoner. It's said, if not for our world's barrier, it should have soared to greater heights. I didn't understand that, but after listening to our teacher, I knew your summon is almost seemingly unbeatable. Isolde smiled cutely. You forgot I have a 94% chance of catching or killing those I consider prey. With my clairvoyance, that chance increases to 98. Godfrey's spine went cold. It's going to be hard to beat me, and I don't plan on giving up the title of valedictorian, Isolde added. She's strong. Possibilities of being one of the most powerful Queen-tier summoners the world has ever seen are equally high. Is liking such a girl even a good thing? Godfrey's irises dilated. We are just friends. He stretched his hand towards her. Time to jog. The tournament is less than 2 weeks away, and I hear there's going to be a sudden change. Isolde took his hand and rose to her feet. Godfrey just realized he was quite lucky to have such a top-class beauty jogging alongside him every morning. Even if they were just friends, 2 weeks later, a great number of students gathered in a grand hall, all seated on rows of benches. The freshman tournament had been conducted in the arena, with Isaac losing to Cecil after an intense battle. He didn't even face snow. Though his summon's combat prowess was surprising, the second-year, third-year, and fourth-year students gathered in this hall were puzzled. It was rare for them to assemble like this. Their tournament was indeed going to be different, as stated by the school board. All of a sudden, the huge doors swung open, prompting everyone to look back as Damien walked in with Vin, Tyler, and a few other seniors. The loud chattering in the hall died in that instant. After Damien defeated Gregory, the strongest teacher in Manhattan High, a school known to produce powerful summoners worldwide, the respect and fear others had for him soared. They could only imagine how much Tyler, Vin, and the other ex-Nexus members had grown during their mission on the moon. One thing was certain, these figures were on par with Isolde. Or at least, that's what many thought, since Isolde simply demolished those she fought without going all out. When Damien sat, the whispers returned. He adjusted his glasses, averting his eyes from John, who sat before him, to Godfrey, who was also looking at him from the corner of his eye. I know the odds were unfair since he got the strength of 3 summons, but he did defeat Nexus Club. Do you want to test him because of that? Rick, a student with orange hair, said with crossed arms as he lightly kicked Damien's chair. He won't survive, Damien replied calmly. The others shrugged, as it was the truth. Damien's summon was a strange one, the yin-yang gorilla. In its yang form, it had a different ability and was a 7.9 high tier, but in its yin form, it had another set of abilities and was a formidable 9 lord tier. Damien's mutation gave him 90% of his summon's power, meaning symbiosis made him as strong as an 8.1 summon in yin form. Coupled with his extreme mastery in MMA, some 8.5 summons might even be on the losing side. At that moment, Sebastian and some teachers came out of a small door beside the podium. The teachers went to their respective seats, while Sebastian went to the lectern, leaning close to the microphone. Good morning, students. You must all be wondering what has changed in your tournament. Well, the second year, third year, and fourth year will all be sent into a Blue Gate dungeon right within the confines of the school. What? Godfrey's eyes narrowed as voices of shock broke out. It's been well over a year since the dungeon appeared, and it is an advantage to Manhattan Summoners High, an avenue for our students to face the true problems of the world in a controlled space. You shall all be sent to the ancient Victorian dungeon city and earn points by killing dungeon beasts. Sebastian paused, glancing at the students who were now all quiet. The weakest beast in this dungeon is an elite tier. They give 2 points. High tier gives you 5 points, top level high tier gives you 10 points, lord tier gives you 20 points, 100 points for a mini boss, and 1,000 points for the final boss, but I would advise you to stay away from the final boss. Godfrey looked at Isolde. 1,000 points must be really powerful. Probably a mid-level or top-level lord tier with a dangerous innate skill. Isolde replied softly, her eyes locked on Sebastian. Now here's what makes this interesting. There are 5 mini-bosses in their own zones. Once you kill a mini-boss, you can assume its position as the new boss and be given 50 points each day. You'll also gain 50 points for every opponent defeated. Whoever defeats you will gain half of your points. This news caused an uproar amongst the students. Top students like Damien, John, and their circles began to eye each other, as every one of them wanted to kill and become a boss, while others saw a more lucrative part in defeating these student bosses. The fountains in the dungeon are access points where you can trade your points for dungeon cores to strengthen your summon, food, water, and other needs you require. This tournament will last for 2 weeks. Use this time to make sure you deepen your bonds with your summons, as they are your future. Sebastian said the last part sternly. Killing your fellow student's summon will lead to immediate expulsion, no matter who you are. I don't care if it's a mistake or not, you must learn how to control your strength. Leaderboard rankings can be seen at the city square, where you can challenge another to gain 50% of their points. The challenge must be accepted, or the winner will not receive any points. Looking at the students one final time, Sebastian spoke. That will be all. Instantly, they began to vanish. Those who saw others vanish tried to compose themselves, but vanished before they could even think. Godfrey could barely look at Isolde before they both vanished. In the next moment, he found himself on a rooftop. It wasn't the flat rooftop of modern buildings, but the triangular-shaped ones. His eyes reflected the vast Victorian city, with dark clouds looming above it. Cold droplets of water splattered on his face, prompting him to look up. It rained, not heavily, just a drizzle. "Looks eerie," Godfrey muttered inwardly. The sudden growling of a beast made him look down at the armored dog, about 4 feet tall, with red skin and layers of metal plates. It bared its fangs at him, growling and barking loudly. More armored dogs gathered, and in a few seconds there were 10 of them waiting for him to come down. Godfrey sighed, his eyes gleamed, and a portal appeared above the dogs. Tempest dropped from it, cracking the pavement blocks beneath his feet. The drizzle struck his golden armor, making soft sounds as it bounced off like torn petals. In that moment, the runes etched onto the 6-foot-long greatsword glowed, pulling all the hounds toward him as if gravity had failed them. Tempest left blurs of his hands as he instinctively activated lightning-fast reflexes, decimating all 10 dogs in a split second. It was as if they were there one moment, and in the next, all that remained were body parts and blood. Both Mountain and Ballista walked out from their own portals and looked at Godfrey, who was gazing down at them from the rooftop. "You were honored with the title of Captain and Chief because of your feats in killing beasts. Show it to me." Godfrey's declaration sounded like a challenge to their pride. All the knights were silent for a moment before Tempest brandished his sword, cutting through some rain droplets. "As you wish, my duke." His armor became dark crimson, and tendril wings sprouted from his back. It wasn't golden and crackling with ferocious intensity, but white and gentle. The darkness fled from the brightness of the long tendrils, which floated side by side, and were so long they almost reached the other building, opposite the one Godfrey stood on. Godfrey had discovered there were different forms of Tempest's wings, after spending a night in his soul's space, and deciphering the runes and writings on the walls of his chambers. Apparently, to become a chief, a knight had to live up to 200 years, and the survival rate of the Golden Order knights was abysmal as they fought against all kinds of existences. This was why captains were powerful, and had a badge of 100 years to their name. Chiefs, on the other hand, were on another level. Not only could they speak fluently, despite speaking rarely, but the beast alchemically fused into them was more disastrous. An example was the lightning phoenix, which was in its passive state when its lightning tendril wings were white, in a battle state when they were golden, and in killer mode when its lightning wings were black with a mix of silver. The most surprising thing was the white lightning, which couldn't harm a thing. As surprising and unbelievable as it was, it only broadened Godfrey's view of the capabilities of mana. With white lightning, though, it flew better and much faster. Godfrey saw a bit of that when Tempest soared above him and tore into the clouds. He could see streaks of white lightning behind the black clouds, going further and further away. Ballista summoned 10 bow knights in his blackout state. They all turned invisible and controlled their weight to the extent that not a sound was made from the 7-foot-tall, heavily armored archers weighing well over 500 pounds. Godfrey had not seen them move so nimbly before, probably because he had always set them before a seen target. This time they were on the hunt. Mountain slammed his spear into the pavement, and 10 heavy infantry knights appeared from misty golden portals, with spears, longswords strapped to their waists, and heavy oval shields. They were almost 2 times the size of the bow knights, golden armor gleaming with menace as their spear tips faced the clouds, and they stood in an elite row of 2. Not one fell out of line. They were neither as swift as Tempest nor as silent as Ballista and his squad. This infantry squad exuded menace from every part of them, their massive spiked pauldrons, great helms that had just 2 holes for eyes that couldn't be seen, and their towering sizes. With heavy metallic sounds, they marched into another street until they vanished into the fog. Godfrey sat on the rooftop. His eyes went blank as he appeared in his soul's space, right in Tempest's chambers, walking straight to the next door. On it was the image of a massive horse clad in thick golden mail and armor. Beside it was a towering pole-like halberd. It looked magnificent and blood-boiling, but when he touched it, a cold feeling crept up his arm. There was something odd about the next night. His door was cold like a block of ice, yet it looked radiant like the noon sun. "Well, I've never seen anyone as smart as you, Godfrey, letting all your summons go hunt while you sit there dreaming about your future." "Keek, he's probably dreaming about Isolde." Those voices, Godfrey recognized them. His blank eyes regained life as he turned to his left. At the end of the street stood the triplets, not alone this time. By each of them were hounds with the slender, streamlined physique of a cheetah, standing at 6 feet at the shoulder. Flames and black smoke billowed out of their shriveled mouths, glowing ribcages and claws. "You better call your summons back, or we're going to leave permanent scars on your face," Leofric snickered. With his hands buried in his pockets, Ulrich glared at Godfrey. "I have not forgotten your punch. You must have felt cool, huh? Well, time for a real battle. Retrieve your summons, or they might have to pick up your limbs." Godfrey leaped from the rooftop, landing lightly on the street. A longsword with a golden hilt manifested in his hand, and he rested his hands on the pommel while the blade was planted on the ground. "I was actually afraid to kill you back then. Imagine what would have happened if I had a longsword," he said softly. "Your mouth has grown sharp. I guess strength truly intoxicates." Wulfric's eyes gleamed, and his hellhound burst forth, racing toward Godfrey like a cheetah on steroids. After training for almost a month on his swordsmanship, Godfrey could proudly say his foundations were solid. Wulfric's hellhound breathed a large amount of flames at him. Godfrey leaped back, somersaulting and sliding upon landing, water splashing from his shoes to his pants. Seeing the other 2 hounds beside Wulfric's, Godfrey's sclera became black, and golden tendril wings sprouted from his back. They spun like blades, cutting and electrocuting the hellhounds, forcing them to retreat. In that moment, Godfrey saw an opportunity and dashed at them. The hellhound he targeted opened its mouth, biting down, but Godfrey moved out of the way at the last moment and stabbed the longsword into its foot. He shoulder-bashed its head, hurling the beast into a building. Without looking, he spun, cutting off the right ear of Wulfric's hellhound. Flying out of its flame breath, he cut off one of its hind legs, wrapped all tendrils around it, and tossed the badly electrocuted beast into another building. The last hellhound hesitated as it took a step backward. Chains burst out of its ribcage, latched onto the other 2, and dragged them back to it. The moment the 3 hounds collided, flames flared and they merged, growing into a 9-foot-tall, 3-headed beast. A Cerberus. As this hulking black Cerberus opened its mouth, a large amount of flames, as viscous as lava, rolled out. Godfrey flew away, but the hound lunged at him. Godfrey's tendril wings went downward, propelling him up and out of the Cerberus' grasp. Mid-air, Godfrey unleashed lightning descent, and a great amount of golden lightning struck the Cerberus. The ripples from the lightning consumed nearby buildings. The pavement blocks used on the street were pulled out of the ground and sent flying in different directions as the 7.6-tier beast howled in pain. Ulrich dashed forth, unleashing a projection of his hellhound. His brothers did the same, and the projections joined to form a translucent Cerberus just before Godfrey. It breathed a great amount of flames that Godfrey evaded by manifesting Bastion. The huge shield pulled him downward, and he launched himself backward with several flaps of his wings. The projection Cerberus came after him, relentlessly clawing at him, but the Bastion blocked all the attacks. Godfrey threw the Bastion to the ground, and the moment it struck the pavement blocks, a mighty force exploded from the glowing shield. It was so mighty that the projection Cerberus was blown dozens of meters backward. It tumbled twice and sank its claws into the ground, sliding backward a bit before it finally stopped. "This is ridiculous. He's holding his own against all 3 of us with our summon," Wulfric said grimly as he watched Godfrey stabilize himself at the end of the street. Behind him was another row of buildings, just horizontal. In that split moment, something huge burst out of a building behind Godfrey, a Titan Jaeguai. It launched a space-rending blow midair, a surprise attack that the triplets were sure Godfrey couldn't dodge. But Godfrey did the unthinkable. His tendril wings entwined themselves around Bane's thick arms, and a great amount of lightning crackled. In the blink of an eye, Bane's arm was fried until it became pitch black. The ape Yaegui bellowed in pain and swung its elbow. Godfrey grabbed its massive elbow with his hand, causing a mini shockwave. His ocean blue eyes gleamed brightly as he plunged the longsword through the Titan Yaegui's purplish-black chest. He grabbed the white hair on its head and crushed the pavement blocks with it. What? Hiding in a building, Cecil couldn't believe her eyes as she quickly retrieved her terribly wounded summon. That sneak attack should have worked. She just didn't calculate those weird wings. Had it not been for them, Godfrey would have been injured. While she was seething in rage, the triplets sent their projection Cerberus and the actual Cerberus, but Godfrey barely turned toward them. A golden translucent construct of Tempest appeared, swinging his enormous greatsword. The amount of lightning crackling on that sword made the triplets, for the first time, feel the fear of death. Swiftly retrieving their summon and deactivating the projection, they fled. Golden lightning flashed through the street, and Godfrey appeared after the triplets, staring at the bloodstains on his longsword before looking at them. Disbelief colored their faces as they fell to their knees. Godfrey had cut their arms and legs, making them unable to use their limbs. "There's no way you could get this strong naturally. You fed right, you're a monster after all," Leofric bellowed, veins popping along his neck. "I've never scarred anyone for life, I haven't beaten people who didn't deserve it, and I haven't fed my summons the meat of any beast summon. You just don't want to accept your inferiority." Godfrey watched his longsword and armor vanish before approaching the triplets. "Never cross my path again." Leofric chuckled mockingly. "What are you going to do?" Godfrey punched his face. The punch knocked out a good number of teeth as Leofric collapsed, knocked out cold. Seeing Godfrey's eyes turn to him, Ulrich shivered. "Keep away from me and those close to me. Don't even touch any member of the school. Please, for your sake." Godfrey buried his hands in his pockets and walked away. Ulrich looked at Leofric, his irises trembling. Could John even defeat Godfrey, someone who brought all of them down, including Cecil's summon, without releasing his own summon? The strength gap made Ulrich, for the first time, feel horror. Somewhere else, Cecil walked out of the building, only to see 4 dogs sniffing around. Her eyes widened. Both she and the triplets were teleported away from the dungeon, leaving Godfrey calmly walking through the silent street. "I should go to the city square and check out the leaderboard rankings. Once I gain enough points, I'll make sure I push Tempest to tier 7. 7 students all had grim expressions as they faced off against 25 armored hounds and a giant Great Dane, which stood at an impressive height of 6 feet with a large, muscular structure. It walked menacingly to the front, growling softly at its prey. Standing at the front of the group were Derek, Dale, Rowana, and Usable. Their summons were beside them, but after facing several groups of these beasts, some of them were already tired, and the environment didn't help, the fog only made it scarier. Derek's elder ant and Dale's armored Emperor Bull charged into the pack of hounds. Rowana's firefly radiated light that brightened the place and energized their summons. Usable stretched her hand and a crimson portal appeared, a blood-drunk mosquito, a 3-foot-tall summon whose feet all ended with curved silver blades. It was a 7.3 high-tier summon. Its needle-like mouth, which had a blood-red arrowhead tip, shot forward like a rope. It dried every hound of their blood and could fly so fast that its prey were dead before they knew it was there. Dale, Derek, and Rowana were terrified when they saw the blood-drunk mosquito suck the Great Dane until it looked like a mummified corpse. Over 7 armored hounds and the high-tier Great Dane fell to the mosquito's swift strike. Their mummified corpses made Rowana's eyes widen. "Usable," she gasped. "What?" The pale-skinned girl tucked her hair behind her ear with a smirk. "You all thought I was weak because I've always caressed your ego." Usable chuckled softly at the expressions on Dale and Derek's faces. Recalling how they felt so important being praised by one of the top beauties made Usable snicker. "My summon is just too dangerous, that's why I almost never brought it out. I am number 9 for a reason," Usable's eyes gleamed. "And you boys might be cute, but you're not that cute." "Usable, it's enough," Rowana said. The blood-drunk mosquito stabbed its proboscis into Rowana and pulled it out. Shocked, Rowana fell to the ground, her eyes wide. "This is an opportunity for us to gather enough points before we become seniors. Can't you see it, Rowana? You're just number 12, so your weakness can be blinding." Others were terrified as Usable looked at them after speaking to Rowana. Well, all of you should use your points and get me something from the fountain, or else. A kiss from my precious Cinderella will get you out of this dungeon. Make your choice. You think we'll fall for that? Dale snickered, and his armored emperor bull charged at Usable, with Derek's elder ant following right behind it. It shot 2 lightning bolts at Usable, but wings sprouted from her back, pulling her into the air while her summon charged toward the other 2. It stabbed the curved ends of its multiple legs into the back of the armored emperor bull, brilliantly piercing through the gaps between the natural armor on the bull's back. As the bull roared, the elder ant swung its arm at the mosquito, but it swiftly moved around, and its proboscis moved like a snake, piercing the elder ant's flesh. In the blink of an eye, the elder ant became skeletons and bone armor, falling weakly to the ground. "Don't worry," Usable said from the top of a building, her wings still spread out so she could move when the situation called for it. "I made sure Cinderella left a little amount of blood to keep your ant alive." Dale swiftly covered himself in his bull's armor and shot off in the other direction, his hooves pounding the ground with sparks of blue lightning. He retrieved his summon before the blood-drunk mosquito could attack it. Others fled but were sucked to the point of being unconscious. After taking several hits, Dale managed to escape Usable, who cursed while hovering above 6 students, all unconscious with wide eyes and their summons laid almost fully mummified around them. "Well," Usable caressed her summon, which she named Cinderella. "Me and Rowana cannot be friends after this, but it's no problem. I'll be far ahead of her in points by the time we become seniors, and the authorities will take notice of me. A small sacrifice for a bigger reward." Cinderella's low-pitched hum made Usable scowl. You know she would have tried to protect them. What a waste of points. I should have made them my subordinates instead. Tusk, I was never the smart one. She pouted, admiring her beauty in a puddle of water before flipping her hair. "Let's go to the city square." At the city square there were a couple of students at different places. Some were at the fountain, purchasing items. Apparently, the items in each fountain weren't limitless. This made resources rare, and the first thing any sensible student who wanted to last would purchase. Once a fountain was dried of its resources, people would clamor for the next, and the next, until there would be nothing left. There were almost 200 students in this dungeon. Buying as much as you could was already a priority, but another question was, could you keep what you had? "Is this real?" Maldred asked, wiping his eyes. Orwen, who stood beside him with crossed arms, nodded. "It has to be." Other people beside them, and everyone who came to check the wooden board hanging on a massive clock tower, had the same expression. Number 1 on the rankings was none other than Godfrey Daniels, with 300 points. The top talents could only line up behind him. When Usable came, her eyes locked on the leaderboard. Godfrey, a malicious gleam flickered through her eyes as she remembered how he threw Lilith at her. She broke an arm that day. "Can you please excuse me?" She heard a familiar voice that froze her in place. Tilting slightly, her eyes met those ocean blue eyes. Instantly, a crimson portal appeared, and Cinderella shot forward at high speed, launching her proboscis. All this happened in less than a second, right before Godfrey, whose hands were in his pockets. Lightning crackled through his body as he leaned to the right, grimacing slightly as the proboscis sliced through the arm of his jacket, cutting the flesh of his skin. Instinctively, Godfrey spun, launching a roundhouse kick at the mosquito, but he underestimated its speed. It deftly dodged and struck once more. Tendrils came out of Godfrey's back, pulling him into the air, narrowly evading the proboscis that nearly touched his neck. His eyes went wide, and he frowned. Then, golden armor covered him from head to toe as a longsword manifested. He looked no different from a mini Tempest. "I guess Nexus are not done with him," said an 18-year-old senior, sitting atop a 7.5-foot-tall orange horse with the stripes of a tiger and a long black horn protruding from the center of its head. It was Rick, the same student who had kicked Damien's chair. He watched as Godfrey and the mosquito moved about, sparks flying as the sword clashed with all the mosquito's bladed legs, including its proboscis. Its proboscis moved like a whip, and it was swift, reacting as if it also had lightning-fast reflexes. I don't think any of his summons can handle the blood-drunk mosquito. Damien personally enlisted her for the club before we left for the moon. Despite her lack of popularity, she's the deadliest in Nexus Club, Rick muttered inwardly, as Godfrey landed some meters away, his armor now filled with scars. Even the helm had 2 scars. One on each cheek. Usable covered her mouth and giggled. "You might be strong, but Cinderella can counter your brute strength and defense. Struggle all you want, I'll drain you. It would be fun to see your shriveled face." The moment she said that, Godfrey dropped his sword. It clattered on the ground as he clenched his fist. Cinderella lunged at him, but Godfrey was strangely one step ahead. His hands remained close to his body while his eyes darted. He leaned left and right, moved backward, sometimes one step, sometimes two, sometimes he would slide to his left or right. After so many misses, the mosquito closed in. Cinderella, Usable yelled, but it was too late. Godfrey's butterfly boxing tactic worked, and he grabbed Cinderella's proboscis. Lightning danced on his right arm as he clenched his fist and launched a punch. It sent the mosquito flying through several buildings. The moment the punch landed, it had already lost consciousness, its head caved inward. Usable immediately fell to her knees, tears trickling down her pretty face as she retrieved her summon. It's just a tournament, you almost killed Cinderella. Godfrey has a record of nearly killing anybody he fights. I know Usable attacked so suddenly, but he's stronger, why hit so hard? A third-year student said with a frown. Just then Usable burst forth, her wings buzzing as they propelled her at intense speed. Her fingers turned into curved silver blades, and she swung down, but Godfrey leaned away. Her claws ended up slicing a huge wound through the chest of the third-year student who had just spoken. His eyes were wide with shock as he fell to his knees. What just happened? Usable ignored the student as she spun. Her feet tore through the air, but Godfrey wrapped his fingers around her ankle and stopped the blow. He tightened his grip, spun, and slammed her into the ground. Web-like cracks spread outward across the pavement blocks as blood spurted out of Usable's mouth. She couldn't even twitch as that blow broke several bones. Her bloodshot eyes trembled, following Godfrey, who looked at the student that had healed. Apparently his summon had a self-healing ability, but the shock of what had happened kept him silent. Rick squinted. I did not predict that outcome. This Godfrey is no weakling, but his advantages are useless before him. I would have loved to put him in his place, at least as courtesy for messing up with Nexus, where we all came from, but hunting is more important for now. With that thought, Rick turned his summon and galloped away. Meanwhile, Usable was teleported away after being deemed unable to continue the tournament. Godfrey, of course, accepted her challenge and reaped half her points, which was just 30. The first thing he bought from the fountain was a map, and through it, he learned that all fountains had different resources, making the hunt for fountains even more intense. On it were also marked the zones of the mini-bosses, paths of Wandering Lord tiers, top-level high tiers, hordes of elite tiers, and the final boss. Godfrey's eyes locked on the final boss zone, which appeared to be on the outskirts of the city. Currently, strong students were after the spots of the mini-bosses, the reason being that points varied. The points of an elite and high tier were different from those of a Lord tier. The 20 points gained from a Wandering Lord tier were called Lord points and might as well be 200 points, and to purchase top-grade cores, he needed top-level high-tier points or Lord tier points. Meaning, those who killed mini-bosses would get 100 of these Lord tier points and 50 daily, amounting to 1,000 points for killing the mini-boss and 500 points daily. Realizing this made Godfrey's eyes widen. His advantage was only temporary. Once the mini-bosses were killed, he would be surpassed effortlessly. He could kill Wandering Lord tiers, but they were incredibly powerful and gave far fewer points than killing mini-bosses, which were also Lord tiers. The entire scheme was designed to ensure students battled for the positions of mini-bosses, or at least defeated the students in those positions and reaped their bountiful points. What this meant was that killing randomly wouldn't allow you to stay on the leaderboards. Luckily, each class would be ranked differently after the overall ranking, so weaker students weren't completely left out. Still, Godfrey knew his competitors. Maybe the seniors were in a league of their own, but he was up against the Nexus King, the mysterious Percival, his ace, Isolde his queen, and others who had been in hiding like Usable. The competition just got tougher than he expected. Sighing, Godfrey dropped the map, which had all this information, at his side and looked at the dark sky. So they want all of us to fight for the spot of mini-bosses, but ignore the final boss, which gives 1,000 Lord tier points and possibly 500 Lord tier points daily. Godfrey shut his eyes. It's powerful, I get it, but I've never sat at the top before. Second, sometimes third. I also dream too small. Everyone wants the best and I just want to match them. I guess I've always been trying to survive in a world of summoners, but I'm a summoner now. Godfrey rose to his feet. Final boss, Dracula the First Vampire, has his castle and an army of demonic bats and some constructs. Sounds dangerous, but I also have an army. I've never really tested my limits, no holding back. His eyes went to the leaderboards. This was a lofty goal, failure was likely, but this was another excellent opportunity to establish Shadow Club's authority. With this thought simmering in his heart, Godfrey waited for 2 days and communicated through his mind to his summons to head for Scarecrow Graveyard. There was a fountain there that had cause with enough mana to lift Tempest to tier 7. He also planned on increasing Ballista's tier, so the Bow Knight Captain's ability to summon more knights would increase. After giving the command, Godfrey himself walked away from the city square, heading for the Scarecrow Graveyard. Lucy stood atop her crimson Dreadclaw crab with other students, some riding different kinds of wolves, bears, and huge insects. She led them but felt concerned that the 2 streets they had passed were silent. When they entered the next street, her eyes widened. She and the others around her all froze at the sight of 40 beasts, armored hounds, Great Danes, dogmen, all turned to stone, littering the street. The cause of all this was the white-haired young man who had his back to them, while his summon, a huge butterfly, perched atop the statue in the middle of the fountain. As if sensing them, Snow tilted his head and frowned. "Of all places, you came here." Lucy flinched. Her summon brandished its claws, but Snow merely scoffed. "Save it, you just walked into the path of a wandering Lord Tyr." Lucy's face paled. "We checked the map, we're far away from the path of any of them." "Indeed, if you had entered one, you'd know. Once they set eyes on you, they'll chase you to the ends of this dungeon." The moment Snow replied, they saw a humanoid silhouette walking through the fog toward them. From the street it came from, it would first meet Snow. When the wandering Lord Tyr came out of the fog, they saw what looked like a man with a top hat over his head, which was covered with a sackcloth that had eye holes. It also wore a thick black frock coat, with both hands buried into the coat's pockets. Jack the Ripper, one of the wandering Lord Tyrs, brought out his gloved hands, revealing a gleaming knife. All the hairs on Lucy's body stood on end. Seeing this wandering Lord Tyr existence, Snow's glimmer-wing butterfly flapped its wings, releasing thousands of glowing green glimmers that flooded the space where Jack the Ripper came from. To Snow's shock, Jack was still walking toward him, showing no signs of falling for his illusion. "Snow, what are you doing? He's beside you." Lucy's voice made Snow snap to his left, and his summon swiftly blew red glimmer on both sides. Yet a knife tore a huge wound across Snow's back. Snow grunted, his eyes widening in fury as he blasted silver glimmer from his palms. In the next moment, huge explosions erupted, engulfing over 5 buildings on both sides of the paved street. This silver glimmer had never been registered in the history of summoners. Glimmer-wing butterflies were known only for their large-area petrification and illusion, but Snow became the first summoner to create a new glimmer with devastating offensive capability. It also pushed his summon from its peak of 6.5 to 7. He petrified the wound on his back to stop the bleeding. Right then, Jack rose from the rubble, pushing away a huge plank that lay over him. His coat was loose, and the gleaming knives within reflected in Snow's eyes. Jack waved his arm, and all the knives tore through the air, heading towards Snow, but they were intercepted by an Aegis shield formed from red glimmer. It deflected the knives, but a gleam shone from the darkness above as a knife stabbed his butterfly. It crashed into the floor while Snow's eyes widened. For the first time, he was the one in the illusion, and it felt horrible. After pulling out the knife, the butterfly turned that area to stone to stop the bleeding. "We need to help," Lucy said, but another sophomore held her back. "We can't. You might have a mid-level high-tier summon, but don't forget that's a Lord tier that has rendered most of Snow's glimmer useless. You'll be crushed instantly." Meanwhile, the glimmer-wing butterfly flapped its wings heavily, unleashing a cyclone of silver glimmer. Lucy's eyes widened as she and the others fled. As they did, the pavement blocks beneath their feet trembled as a wave slammed into them. A great explosion roared, yellow flames rising into the sky as half the street was consumed in this inferno. Other students saw it and looked in that direction. Such an explosion could only be caused by a powerful student facing a Lord tier. "I can be better," Snow said to himself, clenching his fist as cold water droplets from the sky kissed his face. Black smoke and flames were all around him as he recalled when he was 9. That was when he first saw Godfrey's picture on the news. It was a brief talk, but the entire conversation centered on his father's sacrifice, and how he still had not awakened, and everyone should pray and wish he eventually would. Back then Snow hoped Godfrey would awaken, but as time went by his hope became sour, and his pity died completely at 12. His family demanded perfection. Everything about his life was about keep being better, know your place. Yet with all that advantage, he still saw the brief talk about Godfrey, and how they should hope, wish and pray for the son of a hero. It stabbed him. All he got were stern instructions and light congratulations for being the best in his classes, yet Godfrey received all this just for being powerless. All those wishes enraged him. At 13, the broadcast stopped, but the emotions never did. They rose back up when he saw Godfrey, and stepping down on him had never been more pleasurable. That was why he paid attention to Godfrey. He knew him, they all did, the privileged kid, so they slapped trash to demean him. It was even a meme by haters online, and those brimming with negativity were often louder than the positive-minded ones. Unfortunately, Snow's dreams crumbled as Godfrey awakened, as if all those wishes had finally come true, and he crushed them one after the other. That didn't lessen his hate. Why didn't he know his place like Snow was often told? But he broke when Godfrey came to apologize. The blow sprouted like a flower, eating deeper into him as time passed, to the extent he became almost invisible in class. He had been made to believe the strong never apologize to the weak. Bow to the strong, let the weak and imperfect know their place. That was his family's doctrine. Why then did Godfrey apologize to him who was weaker? Why didn't he bow to the strong but opposed them, even when he stood against the entire school? That's what he's going to do. Get stronger, no matter what it takes, break his limits, beat Godfrey and then apologize. They said he can't apologize to the weak. That's what he's going to do. His thoughts halted as Snow heard footsteps. Jack walked out of the black smoke, his coat burned to nothing. There were burns on his white shirt, black pants and his sackcloth mask. About 20 blades hovered above him and then launched at Snow, slicing through the air with a loud sound. The glimmer-wing butterfly came before Snow and turned its body into stone. The knives bounced off its stone skin, but some made swift arcs. Snow instantly turned his skin into stone, but it froze him in place. However, the knives were all deflected. Suddenly, a hand grabbed his neck and stabbed a knife through his back into his body. Snow's eyes widened as he discovered Jack had made his way behind him while keeping him in an illusion. "You will make a fine specimen once I'm done." Jack couldn't finish as something sliced through him. A diagonal thin line appeared, and he split. Snow fell to the ground, his eyes on the 8-foot-tall white death weasel, whose bone blades were now pitch black, more sleek, like they were made of an unknown material and not bone anymore. Evangeline, who sat at a long table along with other teachers, including the headmaster, watching everything through what looked like a portal, spoke. "These two are the most talented students, the reason being, both of them have stepped out of the limits of their summons and have begun forging a new path no one has ever taken with such summons." She looked at Snow. He created the explosive glimmer, turning an illusion-type summon with mid-level offense into a creature ranked second in large area destruction. John, the Nexus King, has turned his weasel's bone blades into black blades, stronger, twice as sharp and capable of changing forms. He pushed the white death weasel from its peak of 8.2 to 8.5. No one has ever done what these two teenagers have done. "You're not wrong," Sebastian said, entwining his fingers, but it all started when Godfrey stepped into Manhattan. His presence has stimulated the students, pushing them beyond what they even thought was their peak. Even Isolde is working very hard. Manhattan's next generation is already breaking historical records. "At this rate they'll outgrow Godfrey," Edwin said. Snow coughed blood as he watched John split from his summon. John glanced at Lucy, who was at the end of the street, then looked at Snow coldly. "I gave an order to bring down the members of the Shadow Club, but you ignored one and went ahead to fight a wandering Lord Tier. You expect to beat a Lord Tier with a mid-level high-tier summon. Have you forgotten your strength?" Snow frowned. "That's the word, know your strength. The same thing I tried to shove in Godfrey's head repeatedly but failed." John narrowed his eyes. "You're a disappointment. You were supposed to be the next king." The moment he said that, the white death weasel lunged toward Lucy. In the blink of an eye, it had traversed the space that once stood between them. Lucy's crimson dreadclaw lifted its huge claws, swinging them at the weasel as it unleashed great heat 5 meters around it. But the weasel, which was before the crab, suddenly appeared beside it, cutting through its thick exoskeleton. The crab slammed against the asphalt road, and magma blasted outwardly, but the weasel was already before its head. The crab saw those merciless black blades inching closer to its eyes. Just then, the water on the street rushed toward them, rising up and forming a giant water dome with the crab, Lucy, and others within. The weasel stabbed through the water dome, and water coiled around its black-bladed arms, splashing on the white-furred creature's face. It suddenly spread out, but before the weasel's face was confined in a water helmet, it became grey smoke. The water dome, much bigger than a building, opened, and a blue-haired teenager who wore a white nose mask walked out, both hands in his pockets. Percival, hard lines formed on John's forehead. As they both stared at each other, Snow's butterfly took him and flew out of the street. You usually let your hounds do the dirty work. Are they not available anymore? Percival tilted his head as a blue portal appeared beside him, and a huge, 100-feet-long beast emerged. The blue-horned leviathan, an aquatic beast known for having dense scales even harder than dragons. It had stubby limbs and great fin-like structures along its back and tail. Despite being an aquatic beast, the leviathan was equally dangerous on land, as it was also an 8.5 Lord tier at its peak. But blue-horned leviathans were known to evolve and gain the King-Queen tier potential. However, Percival was too silent and avoided so many fights that only a handful knew he was actually the Nexus Ace, meaning his strength was on par with, and might even exceed John's. "I'll make you pay for betraying me," John spoke through clenched teeth as he activated Fusion, a skill only performed by Lord tiers, and then also activated Resonance. This skill allowed the summoner to see what the summon could see, feel what it could feel, and sense what it sensed by syncing their hearts and emotions. It worked perfectly with Fusion. "I am fed up with your self-entitlement," Percival declared boldly. "I let you become king, you didn't deserve it." The white death weasel roared, baring its fangs as a cyclone of grey smoke manifested around it, hiding it from sight but not its glowing white eyes. Percival fused with his blue-horned leviathan, and it unleashed a roar that echoed far. Even people dozens of miles away could hear it. It slammed one forellimb into the pavement blocks, and they shattered, unable to bear such weight. A large amount of water rushed into the street from other roads as the weasel dashed toward it. A huge 20-feet-tall door was pushed open as Lilith, Edric, and Yuan walked into a mini-boss den. It was a hall bigger than a cathedral, with high-rising windows of purple and other odd colors. The brick walls were pitch black, and the pillars attached to them rose to the lofty dark ceiling. What caught their attention more than the structure was the nearly 80 meters long purple snake lying headless. Its head lay separately, eyes wide, with two enormous fangs, each the length from the knee to the sole of an adult's foot. A great amount of blood ran down the grand staircase, right through the door they had just opened. Seated at the top of the staircase was a sophomore caressing her white wyvern. Isolde crossed one leg over the other, her face filled with warmth as she slid her palm across Grace's cold scales. "So the princess has killed one of the mini-bosses. Why am I not surprised?" Lilith chuckled. "Get out," Isolde said, glancing at them from the corner of her left eye. "There's the Pendragon attitude," Lilith smirked. "I wonder where it went all this time." "The rules are that we can take a good portion of your points if we defeat you, though I never thought I'd be facing a charmer as a dungeon mini-boss in my life," Edric shrugged with a soft smile. He was confident, the reason being that there were 3 of them, without restrictions or limits on unleashing their summons, and no one really knew Isolde's current tier. It was mysterious. She awakened really early, they all knew that, but everyone just assumed she was all-powerful when her wyvern wasn't much of a threat. As for her second summon, Edric believed all 3 of them should be able to deal with it. Just then, Isolde rose to her feet with a raised eyebrow. Seeing this, Lilith opened a portal and her red wyvern came out. Edric's summon was a huge 8-feet-tall grey lion with a white mane and 2 huge blades chained to its forelimbs, while Yuan summoned his Usura wolf, which was in a powerful state due to the mini-boss blood. Flames roared all around Lilith, but the moment Isolde's golden-orange eyes gleamed, and she activated Dominion, the suppression of her 9.9 Lord-tier giant null butterfly fell on all of them. "This weight, I can't move," Lilith squinted. Not even her 7.5 wyvern, Edric's 7.5 ferocious white-maned lion, or Yuan's 7.6 Usura wolf could take a step. As Isolde elegantly took one step after another, descending the staircase, Yuan's eyes slowly grew wide. She walks like a queen. He had to admit it, Yuan had never seen this part of Isolde, and it magnetized him as much as it terrified him. The moment Isolde's feet touched the last staircase, they lost all connection to mana. Their summons were automatically retrieved to their soul space, and they were disconnected from them. It was a horrible feeling for a summoner. They had just become ordinary humans with slightly stronger bodies due to the usual gym training. Lilith trembled, falling to her knees as the feeling of complete powerlessness dawned on her. The others were also forced to their knees the closer Isolde got, and by the time she stood before them, their bodies were pressed against the ground as they struggled to breathe. Their grunts of struggle were meaningless. "Your last words?" Isolde asked, her condescending gaze filled with distaste. I see, this is what a true Pendragon looks like, proud and detached. She didn't come to Manhattan to get stronger, she came to learn how to exercise restraint. Yuan sighed as Isolde took one more step, and they blacked out. Isolde turned back, her eyes on Grace. She had purchased every dungeon core in the fountain at the top of the staircase and given it to Grace. Finally, after several years, her wyvern was undergoing its transformation into a dragon. I hope you weren't disturbed, Grace. Grace made a weak response, and Isolde smiled softly before turning to the huge snake. Her eyes flashed, and it vanished from the hall. She's a monster amongst monsters, Gregory, the third-year teacher, said in acceptance. Before the end of this tournament, her wyvern will become a dragon capable of reaching Queen tier. Her dragonfly is just half a step away from Queen tier, and her mysterious first summon is said to be beyond our world, so it is frozen in the unknown part of her soul. I'm afraid to say no student in Manhattan is up to par with Isolde in terms of summons. Evangeline nodded. She is, after all, a Pendragon. From past reports from her previous school, she's mostly alone, often ignoring others despite their many approaches. She's technically the cold type, and what we've seen here proves it. Edwin raised an eyebrow. Are we talking about Isolde, the same girl who I've seen flirt with Godfrey several times, even before my eyes? What? The faces of everyone in the room changed as they stared at Edwin in disbelief. Some thought he was mad. Sebastian cleared his throat. Their emotions have nothing to do with us. Where is Godfrey? He's currently ranked last among the 200 students in there. The scene in the portal changed, and everyone was shocked when they saw Godfrey standing in the heart of a graveyard, with 35.5 high-tier scarecrows lying dead around the yard. Seeing the 3 brilliant cores in his hands, Gregory squinted. You wasted an opportunity to remain in the top 10 for dungeon cores right at the start. Is he foolish? It would take a while for his summon to properly assimilate it. Isolde chose the mini-boss den for a reason. What does he? The rest of the words hooked in his throat as Tempest absorbed the core, immediately rising from 6.7 to 7. As if that wasn't enough, Godfrey gave him another core, and the Chief Knight rose to 7.2. Just what is going on? Gregory asked in shock. As if that wasn't enough, Godfrey handed over the last core to Ballista, who, after absorbing it, rose to tier 6.5 from 6. Those summons of his do not obey the structure we thought applied to all summons. Some might need days, some weeks, some months to assimilate and grow. Rarely do we see some summons assimilate in hours, but it's instantaneous when it comes to these Golden Order Knights, Sebastian said, crossing his legs. That's why Godfrey grows so fast. Sebastian's calm expression distorted in absolute shock, just like the others in the room, when they saw Godfrey arrive at the final boss castle, Dracula's Den. Godfrey's eyes gleamed as he scanned the vast expanse filled with countless stakes piercing through people. It looked like farmland of the dead, as the stakes were lined up in rows. Beyond it stood a towering castle. I can sense the overpowering being inside the castle, Godfrey thought, slowly clenching his fist. Sweat beads appeared on his forehead, a sign of fear. Looking at his slightly trembling hands, Godfrey clenched his teeth. Feels like back when I still hadn't awakened. Though he accepted his fear, he didn't let it stop him. As he took bold steps off the paved street and onto the soil, a being watching through one of the massive castle windows raised an eyebrow. Dracula stood at an impressive height of 9 feet, wearing a black coat over a red shirt. His blood-red eyes narrowed. A lost boy wandering, wrong place to wander into, boy, he whispered, revealing his fangs. But just then 3 portals appeared, 2 beside Godfrey and 1 above him. From them, Mountain, Tempest, and Ballista emerged, their blackout states activated. Ballista, now at 7.5 in blackout state, summoned 150 bow knights, while Mountain summoned 150 heavy infantry knights before them. Tempest floated above these 300 armored troops, his lightning wings illuminating their golden armor and chasing away the darkness. Dracula frowned at the sight. Is this a crusade? Then, suddenly he smiled. What an impressive-looking army. As if challenged, he tapped the long fingernail of his index finger on the windowsill. Black smoke rose from the ground, and furry claws burst out from beneath the earth, underneath the stakes in the hundreds. Werewolves pulled themselves free, growling as they locked eyes with the Golden Order Knights. From behind the castle, a dark cloud of 6-foot-tall bats emerged, flooding the skis as they swarmed toward the knights. Both land and air forces were of 5.5 to 6 high tier, but the werewolves numbered about 500, while the bats were up to 2,000. Seeing such a massive horde, Godfrey felt chills. This was bigger than anything he had ever faced. Mountain. Ballista, you both will handle the army, while I head inside with Tempest. Nodding at Godfrey's order, Mountain launched his shield, Bastion, into the air. It transformed into a translucent dome that protected the entire army. The werewolves clawed at the dome while bats swarmed above it, trying to force their way in. All the bow knights raised their bows and began to unleash one powerful arrow after another. Ballista lifted his giant bow and drew an arrow to the limits of his massive bow. Godfrey thought he was about to unleash Trailblazer, but the moment Ballista fired, his hands became a blur, launching arrow after arrow so quickly that all Godfrey could see was motion. The pressure of the bowstring releasing created gales around the knight captain, who released 240 arrows per minute. After 3 minutes, the dome shattered and unleashed a repelling wave that blasted the werewolves and bats backward. Under Ballista and his archers' rapid fire, 1,200 bats were slain. As the dome's repelling wave faded and rematerialized into Bastion in Mountain's grasp, the heavy infantry knights charged, earth trembling under their hundreds of several hundred-pound armored forms as they clashed with the werewolves. Tempest spotted a massive werewolf, 12 feet tall, with claws sharp enough to carve a gully in the ground. He conjured a spear made of golden and black lightning and hurled it. The spear obliterated the giant werewolf's head, wiping out 25 more around it in a single strike. Eventually, as the battle raged, Godfrey stood before the castle doors, his armor stained with blood. Tempest hovered above him. With one hand, the chief knight pushed the massive doors open. Both summoner and summon entered a vast hall, their eyes settling on Dracula, who stood at the far end in the shadows. Dracula stepped forward, a calm expression on his pale face. "Tempest," Godfrey commanded inwardly. The chief knight flew forward, unleashing a great downward slash. The ground caved open as if struck by an earthquake, but to Godfrey's shock, Dracula was suddenly behind Tempest. The vampire's hand pierced through Tempest's chest from behind. He pulled it out just as Godfrey charged, lightning crackling through his body. Growling, Godfrey swung his sword with all his might, but Dracula caught the blade barehanded. With a slight clench, the sword snapped. He was a 9.2 Lord tier. Though Godfrey didn't know that, he quickly realized the gulf between them was immense. Tempest's tendrils lashed toward Dracula, but the vampire burst into a flock of ravens, circling around Godfrey. His lightning couldn't faze them. The birds sliced through his armor with their wings. Seeing the desperate situation, Tempest unleashed his light. It shone so brightly that Dracula recoiled in irritation. As the final boss turned toward the badly injured knight, Godfrey swiftly retrieved Tempest. An arrow flew past Godfrey, but Dracula simply caught it. In the next moment, he transformed into a 15-foot-tall wolf, lunging after the retreating Godfrey. The giant wolf was far faster, its claws swiping at him. The strike sent Godfrey crashing against the far wall. Even his lightning-fast reflexes weren't enough to dodge the attack. Grunting through clenched teeth, Godfrey looked down at the deep claw marks on his left thigh. That leg was already useless, but he had no time to dwell on the pain. The wolf's jaws closed in. He summoned Bastion, which transformed into a dome. The dome shattered instantly, but it bought him just enough time to leap away. However, the wolf's tail slammed into him mid-leap, sending him crashing through a pillar. Godfrey groaned as he hit another wall, fracturing his shoulder blade from the impact. Flames erupted throughout the hall, engulfing him. Dracula grinned as Godfrey's loud, pained cry filled the air. His tier was much lower. He couldn't even comprehend Dracula's abilities. Tendril wings burst from his back, propelling him through the wall. Pikes shot from the ground, aiming to pierce him. At that moment, Godfrey understood how so many had ended up on stakes. Even through the pain clouding his mind, he managed to evade the pikes. Upon crashing to the ground, several bats dived toward him but were slain by arrows. Godfrey grunted as Ballista lifted him. All the Golden Order knights swarmed forward, engaging Dracula's army. "Do not let him leave, bring him here," Dracula's furious roar echoed from the castle. Lightning struck multiple times as dark clouds thickened over the city. Unfortunately, the final boss couldn't leave his castle. Looking up at the hazy sky, Godfrey sighed inwardly. "I went ahead of myself. I've seen the reason we're told to avoid Dracula, but isn't my situation already above me? I walk free in a world that brainwashes humanoid summoners, and Mom said it's because of Dad's sacrifice. How can the same people who tore down his statue allow me, a threat, to walk free, when they'd even poison her for wanting to leave?" Godfrey's heart pounded. "I'm not a naive kid anymore. What was the cost? What is my mother not telling me? If I can't kill a dungeon boss, how can I protect her? Despite his fadding mind, his will burned like metal in a forge. Dad protected her from 100,000. Can't I do the same? I want to do the same. Why? Gregory sighed. This was a predictable outcome. He should be taken out of the tournament. He's gravely injured, and his strongest knight is in the same state. His greed has made him fail. Evangeline looked at Sebastian, who nodded with a regretful sigh, but Edwin shot to his feet, pointing at the screen. Everyone turned, and their eyes widened. Godfrey's wounds were healing, the flesh knitting until only scars remained. Gregory was speechless. Since when could he self-heal? I guess one of his summons has gained an ascendant skill, Edwin said. Never in his life had he felt this happy for Godfrey. His eyes even moistened. Thank you for reading so far. We're almost at 700 golden tickets, and will definitely cross 1,300 power stones by the end of the day. Also, the reviews have been really helpful. A special thanks to reviewers. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story, and if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down.